Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Second Take Cinema, coming at you from the glorious Impala Films headquarters in sunny Southend-on-Sea. I'm your host, Jamie Evans, joined by Rory Jocelyn.
Hello, everyone.
And today we take on a film of epic proportions as we give a second take to Babylon. Babylon is the 2022 American epic historical black comedy drama film written and directed by Damien Chazelle, featuring an ensemble cast that includes Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, Diego Calva, Gene Smart, Joe Venedepo, Lee Jun Lee, PJ Byrne, Lucas Haas, Olivia Hamilton, Max Minghella, Rory Scovel, Catherine Waterston, and Tobey Maguire, amongst others.
Did you say there was someone called PJ Byrne? I get them when my trousers are too tight.
PJ Byrne. He's the guy who kept screaming and was like, "I'll shit in your mouth." That guy, his name's PJ Byrne.
He sounded like he had some PJ Burns, yeah.
The film was made for a budget of $80 million.
80?
80.
I was going to say, there's no way this was only 18 million.
And failed to recoup its budget, grossing only $63.4 million at the box office. Now, to be fair to this film, its release was hampered somewhat because this came out in this country January of 2023.
Right.
Literally, like, first week of January 2023.
So no one had money. So
and I remember seeing absolutely zero marketing for it.
Yeah, I don't recall much marketing.
And people still weren't fully used to the cinemas being open again in January 2023.
Yeah, also, the thing is the problem is this harkens back to old cinema. I said this about, I think it's The Last Duel, which was a Ridley Scott movie. My dad was pissed off that people didn't see that because he really likes The Last Duel. And he was like, it's terrible that young people just haven't watched it. I went, Dad, look, it's a historical drama set in medieval times. Those sorts of films are older audiences. It came out just as the pandemic lifted. The people going to the cinema were young people. It didn't stand a chance.
Old people weren't risking it.
No, and like in 2023, January, more old people were risking it, to be fair, which is why it made some money, but again, this is a look back through the history of cinema. I'm sorry, but like 20-year-olds at the moment don't care. You need to pick your audience, and certainly doing it in the beginning of January when literally nobody has money, that's a bad choice.
In terms of the critical reception, according to IndieWire and The Hollywood Reporter, as well as the opinion of Chazelle himself, reception to the film was polarised. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 57%, with an average rating of 6.4 out of 10. The critical consensus reads, Babylon's overwhelming muchness is exhausting, but much like the industry that it honours, its well-acted, well-crafted glitz and glamour can often be an effective distraction. In his review for the San Francisco Chronicle, Mick LaSalle praised Chazelle's ambition and direction, writing that Babylon is what movie love really looks like. THR's David Rooney described it as a syncopated concentration of hedonistic revelry, praising the cast performances, score, cinematography, costume and production design, but criticising the screenplay and direction, ultimately concluding it's hard to imagine the overstuffed yet insubstantial Babylon finding its way into many screen classic montages. Conversely, Pete Hammond of Deadline Hollywood wrote that it is guaranteed to be a movie that will stay in your head, commending the direction, production design and performances. In his review for The Guardian, Peter Bradshaw assigned the film 3 stars out of 5, applauding the performances of Robbie and Pitt for elevating a story that is in no hurry to engage with the true-life nastiness of its era. Writing for Vanity Fair, Richard Lawson concurred with Bradshaw's sentiment, stating, "These are little islands in a sea of mannered chaos, but it begins to feel, as Babylon stretches out across 3 hours and 8 minutes, that Chazelle has no clear idea where all of this is going."
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. In his review for The Ringer, Adam Naiman described Babylon as a nauseous, high-calorie sugar rush of a movie that not only wants to have its cake and eat it too, but also to puke it up, smear it around, and cram it in the viewer's face. Whilst praising Chazelle's direction and ambition, Naiman wrote that the film was a deliberately designed career killer for the director. Writing less enthusiastically about the film in Variety, Peter de Bruges stated that Babylon presents itself as the apotheosis of all that has come before it, the ne plus ultra of the medium's own potential, and indeed it's an experience that won't be easily topped in this or any year, but that doesn't make it great or even particularly coherent. Author Stephen King praised the film, calling it utterly brilliant.
He just connected with the cocaine usage in the movie.
Calling it utterly brilliant, extravagant, over-the-top, hilarious, and thought-provoking, and described it as one of those movies that will review badly at the time and in 20 years will be regarded as a classic. IndieWire ranked the film's score as number 15 on its list of the 40 best movie scores of the 21st century, describing, "Filled with booming trumpets and epic saxophone solos, it's a truly epic score, perfectly fitting the changing world of the 20s and 30s Los Angeles. But it's the way the score builds upon its motifs and elements from song to song that makes it special." The film was also nominated for 3 Academy Awards, although I do not believe, I will just fact check myself, it did not win any of them. It was nominated for Best Costume Design, Best Original Score, and Best Production Design.
Right.
Now, there is a section talking about the themes of the film, but I'm going to leave that for now and come to that in the main part of our discussion. Okay, so we're talking about Babylon. Babylon is a film I added to the list. It's one of the newer films that we've covered, having only released at the end of 2022 in America and early 2023 in the UK.
This was a Christmas movie in America. That's also about... This should have been a summer movie.
Definitely. I think it was supposed to be, and it got pushed back due to the pandemic.
Yeah, push it back again.
They should have done,
Push it back to the next Christmas.
Well, I think the studio lost faith in it, basically.
Well, but if they're releasing it in January, they fucking definitely
would. Now, we don't often do films that are this new on the show. For anyone listening in the future, as of us recording this, it's currently still early 2024, so the film is not old at all. It's like a little over a year old. Yeah. Now, the reason I wanted to cover this film is, A, I really wanted to see this when it was coming out. I actually wish I'd gone to the cinema to see it. Although, actually, having sat through the runtime, I don't think I would have wanted to go to the cinema.
I don't think your arse could have taken it.
I'd have needed to at least upgrade to the premiere seats, wouldn't I?
Even they don't work for 3 hours.
Or go to the Everyman, where it's a sofa, and then I'd have fallen asleep.
100% though.
This is not made for Odeons.
No.
I really wanted to see this, and I eventually saw it last October. So 6 months ago, roughly. I actually watched it with my dad, of all people.
I'm surprised he sat through all the debauchery, to be honest.
No, he was a big fan of that.
That doesn't sound good either, does it?
But my dad was like, "Oh, it's funny how debauched it was, and, you know, how crazy, and, you know, it was really like that back then." James like, "Yes, Dad, I know. So I watched it with him, and had mixed feelings on it. And I knew it would be the sort of film we'd be able to have a good conversation about.
Yeah, definitely.
And that you'd probably like to see, because obviously you also, like myself, have got a passion for filmmaking as an art form.
Yeah.
And the film definitely has something to say about filmmaking as an art form, as well as the way in which Hollywood itself is structured and the demands that it puts on people, for better and for worse. So I thought I would throw it in, even though the film's not that old.
Yeah.
And
no, it was a good pick.
Watch it again.
Yeah, it also interesting because it showcases the change between silent era Hollywood and talkies era Hollywood, the McCarthyism coming in and changing basically the entire scope of cinema at the time.
Yeah, because it's basically ungoverned before that.
Yeah, and even then, like, the governance is too strong, but it doesn't clean it up as such. It gives the impression or the illusion of being cleaner, but it's still seedy underneath. It's just a different type of seediness.
Very literally in this
Yeah,
case.
in fact, if anything, what it does is it changes it from like a cocaine binge party to corporatism, which is just a different type of corporate. It's a different type of cocaine binged party.
Let's address the elephant in the room first, which is the length of the film.
I thought you would literally talk about the elephant at the beginning of the film.
There is an elephant at the beginning of the film. Did you want to talk about the elephant?
Only insofar as it was unnecessary.
So yeah, we could tie that into the length of the film then. Go on then.
At the beginning, we're introduced to Manny, the main character, who is Hispanic. That's important in terms of the era of the film and his trajectory into Hollywood. He is helping to transport an elephant to basically not a film studio, but like one of the big film producers, I guess. They're having a gala at their massive palatial home, and he wants to bring an elephant in for some reason amidst the sex orgy that's about to unfold. So he's got to transport this elephant. It's unnecessary. The elephant doesn't do anything to justify being in the film at all, because it doesn't really do much. And so we get a delay into this intro. It should have just gone bang, straight out the gate, we're at this party. Instead, we're following a couple of sweaty men trying to drag an elephant up a cliff. One of them gets shat on by the elephant as a bit of gross out humour, which gross out humour never works for me anyway. Honestly, if I'd watched this film without your input, this and an upcoming scene where a woman pisses on a guy, I would have turned it off.
A very happy guy. He's very happy to be being
I'm
pissed
glad
off.
he's happy, but at the same time, I don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
So honestly, I would have switched it off at that point and
He's
not
a
watched the
large
rest
baby
of the film.
man.
Yeah, which is a shame because the rest of the film is actually quite good. But for some reason, it's front-loaded with gross out that adds nothing to the film, has nothing to say, just causes this weird-ass delay. Again, super indulgence. And I don't know what child is watching this film to enjoy that toilet humour, because once those two bits of toilet humour are done, doesn't really come back past one vomit scene later,
Yeah.
which at least has a meaning to the narrative.
The problem you've got is, and this is interesting actually, so we're going to get into some of the meta-ness, and it's really hard not to talk about some of the other themes, because they're all very tied together.
Yeah.
So what I want to say is, first of all, again, one of the first things my dad sold me the film on was an elephant shits on a person. My dad's 62 years old, and he found that hilarious. He honestly couldn't. I'm talking bent over laughing while he was telling me about it, which is not normal for my dad. My dad doesn't like comedy. Like, he won't watch. If I said to him, "Oh, Dad, I recommend this film to you,"
Jackass?
it's a comedy. He'd probably watch Jackass.
Because that's Jackass humour. So
what I'm saying is, it's not necessarily children who find that funny.
Well, it is.
But no. But
I'm gonna be that guy.
What I want to come back to later, but I want to put a pin in this for now,
Sure.
because it's going to be my main part of the discussion. I don't want to
You don't wanna
essentially
spoil it
blow
now.
my load too soon.
Mm.
My dad's a thoroughly working class man,
Mm.
and I want to just put a pin in that. But let's
come back to class later.
yes, how humour works amongst the working class. So yeah, the length of the film is incredibly long. I'm not sure it needs to be this long, because it's not a case of, well, it's long, but it feels quick. No, it feels long.
It drags at points.
It does, and I think it's because the film's trying to tell so many different stories. When you think about it, you've got Margot Robbie's story. Yes, some of them cross over, but this film is trying to tell Nellie LaRay's story, Jack Conrad's story, Manny's story, what's his name? The trumpeter. Sydney. I can't want to say Samuel.
Yeah.
Sydney Palmer's story.
That's it, yeah.
And the history of film.
Yeah.
So that's at least 5 stories I can count off the top of my head that this film is trying to tell.
And they all have tangents as well.
And they all have tangents, like Nellie LaRay's stuff with her dad.
Yep.
And
the drug deal. Oh, not the drug deal, the gambling.
Yeah, the gambling
The
addiction.
guy money and stuff.
And it is... So put it this way, there's a scene in the film when it first transitions to talkie pictures.
Yes.
Where Nellie LaRay is struggling to do a scene. And it's a very humorous scene, and being filmmakers ourselves, we found it quite funny.
Is this to do with the sound?
Where the sound keeps messing up, and the guy's in the recording box, and they won't let him out. It's very funny. But that scene goes on for about 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, now
and it didn't need to.
No, it needed to be there, I think, to show the struggle of how sound entered the film market and how it caused more friction than it solved problems. But yeah, it is too self-indulgent.
The fact they go through so many takes of the scene.
Yeah, we only needed 2 or 3.
Yeah.
And we would have gotten it, okay, this is a ball ache.
It's not working, yeah.
Yeah.
The party at the beginning is great. It's a wonderful opening to a film. Arguably goes on too long.
The party goes, yeah.
It's 30 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, because it ends with him going back to Jack Pitt's
Conrad.
house. Yeah, going back to Jack Conrad's house and being like, oh, God, like, and he's like, I want you to hang around. And then it cuts to the opening title card at 31 minutes in.
And he importantly makes a speech about how Hollywood is stagnating and they need to innovate, which is a theme that comes throughout the film, is the need for innovation. But the innovation naturally comes with some people becoming obsolete along the way.
Yeah.
So I just want to read a little bit here about the themes in the film to see if we agree with these. It's only a couple of paragraphs.
Yeah.
In an essay for film, Robert Daniels asserts that Babylon is essentially a story of identity and assimilation in early Hollywood, whilst noting the similarities it shares with films such as The Last Black Man in San Francisco, 2019, Bamboozled, 2000, and Medicine for Melancholy, 2008. I'm afraid I haven't seen any of those films.
I haven't seen any of those either.
Daniels focuses on the character Manuel Manny Torres and his rise into the Hollywood studio system. In the process, Manuel cuts off ties with his Mexican roots. Though they live in Los Angeles, he never visits his family. He Americanizes his name to Manny, and at a party thrown by William Randolph Hearst, he presents himself as a Spaniard. I missed out on that. At that fancy party that they go to, where she's trying to be posh, Manny lies that he's a Spaniard, not a Mexican.
Oh, okay.
I missed that. I was focused on her trying to be posh.
Yeah, I remember him saying it. I didn't realise that. I guess I just missed that because I'm like, well, Spanish, Hispanic, similar. Yeah. Not the same, but similar.
Manuel becomes intoxicated by his proximity to the white capitalistic greed that governs Hollywood, and partly the American dream of upward mobility, causing him to traverse a tenuous betweenness of identity. Daniels writes that Manny's erasure of his identity is sparked by his fantasy romance with Nellie Leroy, who represents what he loves about Hollywood, an indefinable magical quality, upward mobility, picturesque happiness, and the ability to permanently define yourself. Daniels also adds that whilst climbing the social ladder, Manny contributed to the mythology of Hollywood, recalling one scene where he expeditiously retrieved a camera for a large destructive set, and a picturesque scene is shot without future film audiences' knowledge of its production, and another scene where Manny pressures black trumpeter Sidney Palmer to don blackface during the filming of a jazz short so the lighting on the set doesn't lighten his complexion in the final product. So let's talk about identity first of all then, shall we? So let's talk about, because actually I think there is something to that, in that this does seem to be a film about, a big theme of the film is erasure of identity. Nellie Leroy has added that to her name. Her actual birth name is Nellie Roy.
Yeah.
She added the la.
Yeah, and that's why there's a joke during the course of the film from Manny saying, you know, can you tell me your name in French? And she's like, he's like, it is French.
Yeah.
Because Leroy is French.
Yeah, but it's not her real name. Her real name is Roy. She is told, because her career does well for a while, but starts to stagnate as Hollywood or the American public becomes more moralistic. And the solution the studio has to that is to essentially My Fair Lady her and try and force a square peg into a round hole and make this sort of low-class party girl from Jersey into a lady.
Yeah, so yeah, it is entirely that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the same thing happens
That will also come back to the discussion on class.
Yes.
Yeah.
The same thing happens with Manny. Who, as we've just realised, ends up denying his Mexicanness,
to whiten himself, essentially.
Yeah. And ends up becoming, in order to play with the big boys, because near the start he asks to work on a set, doesn't he? And the character Flea plays, Bob Levine, says to him, "You're exactly where you're supposed to be."
Yeah.
Which is a servant, basically.
Yeah.
A butler type figure, isn't he?
Yeah, he's basically, because let's be honest, at this point there is really no diversity in Hollywood.
Yeah, it's still very racist at this point.
Any diverse people are behind the camera, not in front of it.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of like black musicians, for example, contributing to soundtrack while they're filming, but there's none in front of camera.
No,
which is where he gets his big break, actually, isn't it? Because when they're filming this fucking song where there's all these people singing in the rain, but it's not singing in the rain. That's the song. It's something else.
No, the song is singing in the rain.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. They're doing just a really shitty little dance, aren't they? That's really boring to watch.
Yeah, it's really bland. And he asks Sydney, like, what do you think? Like, you know, what can we do to give this pub? He goes, well, the problem you've got is your camera's facing the wrong way.
Yeah.
So he turns it the other way, creates the music video genre in a sort of way by filming the jazz band instead, which creates the diversity. But then, such a good scene later on. When it comes to identity, can I talk about this scene?
Yeah, go ahead.
Later on in the film, Sydney's he's a rising star. He's doing jazz movies. He's got a decent house now. He's still basically a jazz musician, trumpet player, but he's the lead of all this musical shorts and with sound. And then as he's doing one particular production, which ends up being his last, as you say, he's asked to black up. So almost essentially blackface himself as a black man, because I cannot believe that they couldn't have just reduced the lighting on him.
Yeah.
It seemed to be that it was more of a pain in the arse to reduce the lighting than it was to ask him to blackface himself, which is realistically what it was. So, yeah, it's like, well, he's too shiny. And the issue wasn't that they didn't... Because the issue wasn't that he would seem white, per se, or the issue wasn't that there were black people in it. It was because of the way it was at the time, they couldn't show a diverse group. So you could have all black people in a film, but you couldn't have a mixture of black and whites.
Yeah.
And where the lighting
in the southern states, they say, don't
they?
they?
Yeah. And where he looked whiter, because they'd made the light overbearing on him. It's entirely their fault. They ask him to put on this burnt cork it's not even a similar tone, is it? It's burnt cork.
Well, I was going to say, it's called burnt cork, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's literally charcoal black.
Yeah.
And he looks absurd, because now his lips are too bright, which gives him that
caricature.
It gives him that minstrel show look.
It's a great piece of acting from that actor, Joe Vanadeppo, I believe that is.
Yeah.
And it's a great piece of acting where
in this film.
You could see a million emotions play over his face in one sequence.
Yeah.
As because they basically, and this represents Manny, this is sort of the completion of Manny's erasure of identity.
Yeah.
Because he goes in and acts just like one of those white capitalist studio heads.
Yeah.
He's suited and booted. He's now wearing his hair slicked back, isn't he? Like greasy slicked back.
Yeah.
And he comes up to him, and obviously he's also a gentleman of colour.
Yep.
Yeah, they should in theory be united against the white oppressors, but instead he sided with them. And he goes to him and he offers him the burnt cork. And when Sydney's sort of like, that's really stupid, I'm not doing that, he pulls a proper bitch move where he's like, well, all the other people on this production are going to lose their jobs because of you then.
Do you want to be the reason they don't get paid?
Yeah.
So he does it, not for his own sake, not because he basically capitulates to the white man. It's to support his brothers on stage to make sure they get paid.
Yeah.
But he essentially has to destroy himself in order to do it. And you can... Honestly, this actor is incredible. You get every single piece of that without a single bit of dialogue from him. And during the performance of him playing the music, because there's quite a bit of where the camera's panning around him, and it's just playing through his face, like the embarrassment, the shame, the upset, the betrayal, you know, because he was a black performer, and now it's like, dude, you're not black enough now.
Yeah.
It's all of that's mate. Honestly, he's my favorite actor in this
On
because the
the
performance is so
Yeah.
good.
On the flip, so you've got two characters who've essentially erased their identities voluntarily because they desperately want to be in Hollywood. You've then got Sydney, whose identity is erased by Hollywood against his will, and he quits.
Yeah.
His counterpart is Jack Conrad, played by Brad Pitt, who's also had his identity erased by Hollywood, but hasn't quit. He's stuck with it, and now he's been in the industry for at least 20 years.
Can I just ask, when you say identity, because bear in mind, like the others are a little bit more clear cut. Manny being Hispanic, Sydney being black. Jack Conrad is white. It's Brad
Yeah.
Pitt, so there's no diversity per se
No.
in him being there or not being there. What is the identity that's erased?
So he's built this identity over several years of, he's a leading man and he works in all these productions and things like that. But his identity is erased by the passage of time.
Right, I see.
Which is that identity that he's built no longer works. And Hollywood no longer wants it, and the American public no longer want it. And there's a quite powerful scene where he goes to watch one of his films, and it's a serious drama, and the audience are laughing at it.
Yeah, he's doing this emotional romance scene, and everyone's just pissing themselves.
Yeah, and there's this great bit where he goes to see Jean Smart's character. I can't remember the character's name. She's the reporter.
Eleanor St. John.
Eleanor St. John. He goes to see Eleanor St. John, who is basically a gossip column
journalist,
rag publisher, basically. I hate to call it journalism because it's rags. It's gossip rags.
Yeah, it's basically as much journalism as the Daily Mail or the Sun, but people call it journalism, but it's just shit.
Yeah, and he goes to see her because they've sort of been friends for a long time, but she's now written this article about him, basically saying he's done and dusted and his career's over. And he thinks to ask her why she wrote it, but it's a very good scene. It's mostly a monologue from her. It's mostly just facial reacting from Brad Pitt, where she says, "That's not why you're here. You're here because you want to know why they laughed." And she then does a great monologue
where scene is brilliant.
She explains to him, there's nothing you can do differently. You can't change and become Flavour of the Month again. You can't change and become what the American audience want now. The fact is, actors and celebrities have a sell-by date. Unless you're incredibly lucky enough to be one of the relatively small number of celebrities who achieve timeless status, which is very few. Funnily enough, someone like Bruce Forsyth, who we've joked about before, he had a career that went something like 70 years.
Yeah, he was technically relatively young when he did Bedknobs and Broomsticks, for Christ's sake.
Is he in Bedknobs and Broomsticks?
He's the guy who tries to shoot the children in Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
Oh, okay.
That's Bruce Forsyth.
I know he was a variety show performer in his younger years.
Yeah. That man has been in everything.
Yeah, and even that, he wasn't doing one thing. He transitioned into game show host.
Yeah.
Is what he was most known as by the time I was born.
The only thing
for things like Play Your Cards Right and eventually Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah, so dancing always followed him. That's why he got Strictly Come Dancing, even at a very old age, because he was a very respected and for a good reason, dancer throughout his whole life. But as you say, he did film roles. He was mostly known for hosting TV game shows.
Yeah.
But the man was an incredible dancer. Yeah. And unfortunately no longer with us. But,
no. Made it to his 90s, though. He had a good long life, didn't he?
Lasted ages.
Someone like... I tell you, think of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnold Schwarzenegger is kind of like the Jack Conrad character in this. In that...
He's timeless in that he'll never be forgotten.
Yeah. And this is what she says to Jack Conrad, is technically you will live forever. Because years from now, when we're all dead, someone will come across your films and watch them, and it will be as if you're alive again for that brief moment of time.
It's like they know you.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was at one point the most famous man in Hollywood in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
It was just hit after hit after hit. Terminator, Kindergarten Cop, Jingle All the Way, the one where he goes to Mars,
Total Recall.
Total Recall. things like that. Predator, Commando. He was the guy, built around a persona that had even more of a finite shelf life than being an actor does it usually, because it was based so much on his physical appearance.
Yeah, his henchness.
Yeah, and that's something you cannot keep with you forever.
Yeah, he still, even before he became the Governator, his film career was dwindling.
Yes.
And I like something like The Sixth Sense. Not Sixth Sense. The
Sixth Day.
The Sixth Day was a brilliant
That'd
film,
be a bit different, wouldn't it? I see dead people. Do you see any of them now? Oh my god, I was dead the entire time. No.
Spoiler alert.
Oh, all right.
No, I've seen The Sixth Sense, don't worry. But no, Sixth Day is one of my favourite Schwarzenegger movies. I think it's brilliant, but it didn't sell as well. He was not on his A game in terms of sales or marketing.
And I kind of feel that Arnold Schwarzenegger now, I'm not saying that he should. I like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He seems like a great guy. And he does seem to have been able to accept that his day as a top star's done.
Yeah.
But he's a bit like the Brad Pitt character if the Brad Pitt character didn't choose to check out early.
Yeah.
If he continued and made it to the age Arnie is now... Because let's be honest, when you see an action film with Arnie in now, isn't it just a little bit sad?
When he makes a new one?
Yeah. And it just comes straight to DVD. Or straight to streaming, and you're watching it, and you're a bit like...
This was the biggest box office success of his era, and this is what he's doing.
He's 70-odd years old, still trying to do an action film, where it's clear it's a stuntman half the time, which fair enough, of course it is, he's in his 70s.
See, the only time I think it worked, and it's because of the nature and the design of the film, is the Expendables trilogy. And it's because they're all meant to be old has-beens.
But even them... It was good and cool in the first one. We're up to 4 now, and it's become sad.
I mean, number 4 is sad for a multitude of reasons from what I've heard. I haven't watched it. 3 was definitely the last time it was at all cool. But even then, I think it was losing its sheen.
The general public don't... The third one's got a bad reputation.
That's a shame.
I didn't mind it either.
I'll tell you what, Antonio Banderas was a dream in that.
Yeah.
He was fucking hilarious.
Yeah, the public reception of the third one was not good.
Fair enough.
Hence why it took so long to get a 4th one off the ground.
Yeah, and what a terrible choice that was.
So, I think loss of identity and the nature of identity is a huge factor in this.
Is it just me, or does Brad Pitt's character, Jack Conrad... A lot of the design of him, to me, spoke of Errol Flynn.
I think he's definitely supposed to be...
Because the moustache matches Errol Flynn's moustache.
I think he's definitely supposed to be reminiscent of... he's not literally playing Errol Flynn, but he's definitely evoking that archetype, that sort of Valentino, Errol Flynn era swashbuckling actor who, as they aged, the career started to fall.
Yeah, because I think that did happen with Errol Flynn as well, because he was a very romantic, hot, sexy lead.
Yeah.
And then he did talkies, and they did work. He did sell, like, his Robin Hood was one of the early versions of Robin Hood, things like that. But they're they're cheesy as all hell and a bit funny. Like, his version of Robin Hood has a bit where they kidnap Maid Marian and a bunch of the
Merry Men.
Not the Merry Men capture Maid Marian and the Sheriff of Nottingham and the guy who's in charge, the Prince. And
right.
They take him. They're sitting there like roasting a big, honestly, the biggest pig you've ever seen. Roasting it on a big spit roast, going stuff yourselves, like throwing a mockery of a feast. And then Maid Marian's like, you're just evil people. How could you be like this? Like, have you met the poor? Walks her through a hedge, and I shit you not, day turns to night instantly. On the other side of this hedge, there's all these poor people in rags lined up in front of a cauldron being served literally the horriblest looking gruel you've ever seen. Going, God bless you, Robin!
Right.
Literally that extreme. He shows her all that, walks through the hedge again, back to the feast, where it's now magically daytime again, and it's all bright and happy, and he goes, I'm sorry you had to see that. It's like, you fucking dick.
Wow.
And that level of I think it was that level of not being able to see You know, he thought that was obviously romantic, like, I am actually still a good guy because I'm helping these poor people, and I've shown you that, but I am sorry you had to witness it. It's like, do you know how fucking arrogant and smug and classist that comes across? I think they didn't show that like a lot in Babylon, but I think that's where Brad Pitt's character is sort of from, which is why she says he can't. Because the obvious argument just from the clip we see is, well, you've aged out, but you could just change the way you perform or the way your scripts are written. But she doesn't suggest that, and I think the reason is because he's too arrogant to see the change.
And I think also we're taking for granted that that's something that happens more often now. Actors do seem to be able to transition more now.
Yeah.
Back then, typecasting was much stronger.
Yeah.
And once you couldn't do what you were known for anymore,
You were done.
You were done.
Yeah.
It especially affected actresses, didn't it?
Yeah.
Because the ones who become famous while they're young and beautiful, and then as soon as they get to like 35, all of a sudden they're not getting any roles anymore.
And here's the thing, ironically, you do get a bit more of it nowadays still. It still happens.
Oh, I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all.
But yeah, it doesn't seem to have run up because we do have older famous actresses now. So, but women tend to be given on a Hollywood level. This isn't what should be right. This is just how it was at the time. Women had a shorter shelf life.
Yeah.
Because they had to be young and beautiful and innocent.
Yeah.
And once they got to a certain level, it's like, well, now they're women, like full women. That's men don't want to see that at the cinema.
Yeah,
and
which is gross.
Yeah. Of course it is. But yeah, so there's a lot of that in this film. It doesn't tackle it all, but it does at least touch upon it.
Another interpretation of the film is that it's actually about the inevitability of our own mortality.
Okay.
This is the last bit I'm going to read. Lisa Leman from Collider observed that Babylon functions as a rumination on how human beings try to outrun and ignore their innate mortality, pointing to the various nonchalant depictions of death, such as the newscaster's very casual announcement about the suicide of a female Jack Conrad fan. That's quite near the beginning when they announce that he's married the Hungarian girl. Yes. And he goes, couldn't stand the fact that he's married and killed herself.
Well, that
what
was
a
the woman.
shame.
That was the woman who drugged herself over at the party. Was it not? Yeah, same woman, was it not?
I'm not sure.
But I didn't know if that was meant to read as Hollywood killed her and changed the story to whatever they wanted.
Oh, okay. I didn't realise that.
Well, I mean,
it might be.
I'm fairly certain it was the woman who...
The same woman who was
urinated on the guy.
Yeah.
And then overdosed, but she wasn't dead.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if they changed the narrative, because they had to get her out of there in some way. They changed it instead of she was a drug addict and she killed us.
Yeah.
You know, I think that was my interpretation.
Leman also pointed to a key scene in the middle of Babylon concerning Conrad briefly being overwhelmed by the death of his friend George Munn before returning to his default unflappable persona to be another key instance of the feature functioning as a tragic meditation on how people try to evade the inevitable presence of death. I would argue as well, Margot Robbie's character, once she gets herself into all the trouble, and Manny's trying to help her, isn't he?
Yeah.
But she's just sitting around snorting cocaine like it's not happening.
Yeah.
And talking about going dancing and
is
ignoring the problem.
Yeah. Someone else will fix it for her is the idea, I think.
Yeah, but I think taken in the wider context of this film, I do think you can make an argument it is about the inevitability of death and how we try not to deal with it.
Yeah.
As humans, we always try not to think about it, don't we? Because it's too sad.
Yeah.
And film and celebrity has become a way of semi-achieving immortality.
And that, I mean, that is the direct reference, as we made when he goes to see
St. John.
St. John, she says that, you've managed to achieve what I cannot, which is immortality.
Yeah, because he calls her a cockroach, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You don't create anything, you live in the shadow of other people like a cockroach.
And to be fair, her statement on it's basically like a house fire. You're the humans, I'm the cockroach. But
when it burns down, the humans die
and the cockroaches survive.
Yeah.
Because we don't believe we're better than the house.
Yeah. Which is very similar to, I've not seen it, but I've seen the trailers. There's a line in Oppenheimer that Robert Downey Jr.'s character has where he says something about, It's something to the effect of, he's talking about how rich and powerful he is, and Oppenheimer says to him, but I've never heard of you. And he says something like, of course you haven't, that's real power.
Right.
Because real power hides from the light.
Right.
Because
I suppose.
because the sun burns.
Right.
And people go and show off in the sun because they want notoriety and
They want
immortality.
to be noticed. Yeah.
But they're the ones who get burned.
Yeah.
And the ones who hide in the shadows rule forever.
Interesting.
So it is an interesting and recurring theme in Hollywood. We'll talk more about the production first. I want to get into my themes about classism last. Because I've got an interesting question I want us to... Or the film, should I say, poses an interesting question. In terms of the production, this film's glossy as hell.
Yeah.
It looks wonderful.
Yeah.
And really,
undeniably,
it really does capture like that 1920s, 1930s feeling, but not in a cute, droll way that I think a lot of period pieces do, where everyone's like, gee golly, and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's also not fawning over it.
No.
It's not sitting there going, look how wonderful they used to be. It's not. It's showing them as gritty and nasty as anything, getting pissed on right at the fucking start. You know, it's not... As much as it may be in awe of the period, it's not promoting the period.
It's not
either.
shirking from the problems with the period. But at points almost feels like it does. And I get this. I do get it. I kind of wish the excess was still there, in a way.
What, in Hollywood?
Yeah, we've talked about this before with regards to music. And we've mentioned before, I think on this show, when you think about musicians like the Rolling Stones or Guns N' Roses, you know, people who were big in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there's all these stories that are, in reality, bad because it's people behaving like utter pricks. But for celebrities are great. Stories like, you know, David Bowie and Mick Jagger got caught eating a Mars bar out of a prostitute's vagina. Guns N' Roses. That's a real story.
Jesus Christ.
Deep
fried Mars bar.
Yeah. Guns N' Roses on Californication they end up doing.
Oh.
On Guns N' Roses, how many hotel rooms did they trash?
Yeah.
And the thing is, in reality, that is bad. But as a story of these legendary musicians, it's like, yeah, that's a cool story. You know,
See, I don't agree.
Alice Cooper wakes up back in the 70s, would wake up and literally before he'd even had breakfast would neck a 6-pack of Budweiser. And then there's this story about like how ill that made him eventually, and he was like throwing up blood. And it's obviously terrible on a human level because he nearly died and it's excessive. But it's this sort of story of excess that goes with celebrity. And they had it in film, you know, there's classic films where you hear about things like, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen now, but you don't hear about it now. You used to hear these stories, didn't you, of like, they would build a cocaine budget into the film's budget because they knew that they were going to have to buy a shitload of cocaine to keep the actors happy. You get films like Caligula that infamously... it was one of the most expensive films ever made at the time in the 70s. It's got a young Helen Mirren in it and Malcolm McDowell, I believe.
Right.
And this is back when directors had all the power on a film set, not the producers. Directors were kind of trusted to do the film. In fact, this is probably one of the reasons they're not anymore. And the studio just gave him all this money and was like, right, go film your big Roman epic. And X amount of, 2 months later, the studio were like, we ain't seen any rushes or nothing yet. I wonder how they're getting on with this film. Went to check on them, and they'd just blown the budget on cocaine and hookers and orgies and things like that. And the director was like, well, it's research for the period. Because obviously Caligula was famously debauched, wasn't he?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I don't find that cool. I honestly don't find that cool.
Then they had to take more money to actually try and rush the film. And I've never seen the film, to be fair.
All I'm thinking is there was a lot of people that were going to make interesting movies who didn't get financed because all the budget went on these dickheads, utter cunts, taking cocaine and hiring hookers on the money that they should have been using to make a film. I don't respect it, Jamie.
Yeah, I do.
I don't.
I
It's the
do.
reason why when I watch Burst City, which is a Japanese indie movie, they blew most of their budget on cocaine and drugs, which is why the film is nonsensical.
Yeah.
And I don't respect that either.
Yeah.
And I'm at least consistent because I'm not. That's an indie movie, and I was like, you dicks! You managed to get the money for a feature, and you blew it on cocaine like an idiot.
Yeah.
Right? Well, I'm sorry. Just because you're from a big budget big budget picture, and you're making a big budget film with big actors, doesn't mean you can blow the. I can understand if they were building it in because some of the actors are assholes and want cocaine, whatever, fine. But to blow the entire budget on that, sorry, that's not a cool story.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great story.
No, because let's be honest. Here's the question: what are the intimate details of that you know, or is it just they blew it all on cocaine and hookers? Huh. That's not. You don't get anything out of it. That's. I could say that about anything, and it not even be true, and it'd be just as good as a story. Yeah. When I was 21, I got 20 grand, and I blew it all on hookers and cocaine with my best friend Cedric. It's the same story, but it's bollocks.
Oh yeah, but it isn't the same. And
I don't know anyone called Cedric.
What's ironic is I don't even do drugs, and I have no intention on ever doing drugs.
Yeah,
which is ironic. But it just Hollywood has and music, both of those industries, they have lost something. There used to be a mystery to them, an air to them that kind of came with the sheer amount of excess that went with them. Now they do feel just corporate. And they actually do a really good scene in to bring up Californication one more time. There's a really good scene in Californication that sums this up. Season 2 of Californication, and I'm not saying this is healthy, by the way.
Yeah.
Season 2 of Californication, Hank is writing not an autobiography, that's where you do it for yourself. He's writing a biography on a character called Lou Ashby, who is supposed to be a legendary rock music producer, who, within the universe of Californication, has produced all these legendary rock bands, and he's meant to have worked with, like, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and all these people, right? There's a scene where Hank goes to his house to watch him working with a modern rock band.
Right.
And the modern rock band, if you just look at them on the surface level, they all look like rock bands from the 70s. They've all got long hair and tattoos, and they're all wearing black. But then, and again, this isn't healthy because I'm about to criticise them for living well. Whereas people in rock bands in the 70s did not live well.
No.
That's why a lot of them died young. Anyway, there's a bit in this thing where they're recording their album and they're being right little bitches, just like arguing with each other, but over really silly bollocks like, oh, I'm not in the shot of the camera enough. And then they stop for a quick break and they have some food, right? And they bring them these little cupcakes, and the band guy, I already know how you're going to react to this. The guy who's meant to be like the hardcore lead singer of the band, he's trying to be like an Axl Rose type, peels this cupcake, takes out a little knife, cuts the cupcake in half because he's watching his carbs. And you're like, you're a fucking rock star. You should be pounding beers.
Okay, can I just say, that is the opposite extreme. Like, I understand what you're saying. If you want to watch a rock star, you don't want a rock star who's sitting there, oh, it's tea time, but I better watch my calories. I understand that. I do get it.
Yeah.
But that's the opposite extreme. There is a middle ground where you're not literally screwing everyone else over in your life, but you are having the time of your life without being a prude. And I don't understand this want to watch someone's excess to their own destruction. Weirdly enough, so I'm going to bring South Park into this. You brought Californication. 2 quick stories from South Park. Number 1, they kind of talked about this intrigue of watching a celebrity destroy themselves for our own gratification.
Yeah, it's very morbid.
Yeah. They did it with Britney Spears. They had an episode where Britney Spears it was during when she was having a meltdown and shaving her head and stuff. They did an episode about her, but it wasn't really about her. The reason it still works even today is it's not about her. It gets to a point where she takes a shotgun and blows the top half of her head off, but somehow is still alive.
Right.
So, and it's just her tongue going blah, 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 wobbling above her bottom jaw. But people are still like, oh, she looks fine, she's gorgeous, put her on stage, keep her performing, and it was this whole thing of, and eventually it gets to this, you'd like this episode, I think, actually, Jamie, because it gets to this weird, creepy, almost cult-like thing, where everyone in the town, because she tries to get away from being the self-destructive celebrity, they all come around her, and they kill her in the middle of the forest, because they're like, she's no longer doing what we need her to do. And she dies in this horrible manner in the middle of a forest, which is played for laughs, but it's actually not a funny episode as such, insofar as you're actually like, this is just how we consume celebrities.
Yeah.
So even South Park recognised that 20-odd years ago about how we... and Britney Spears essentially was done the same way as celebrities in this film. We want them to be excessive, and, oh, look, she shaved her head. How funny for all of us. It was that. And the other way is that I'd create a counterpoint for being radical, being rebellious, but not being a dickhead or ruining or wasting opportunities is again with South Park. Trey Parker and Matt Stone were outsiders to Hollywood, and when they did the South Park movie, they basically bent all the rules, and they said if we didn't voice every character, we would have been sacked on the spot. Because they went, we're making it a musical. At that point, in the 90s, musical was basically how you went, right, we're killing the franchise.
Yeah.
But they stuck to their guns, went, right, we'll make it a musical. They were told there's to have no swearing. So the entire intro of the film has 0 swear words.
Yeah.
Until they get in the movie studio and open up with the song Shut Your Fucking Face, Uncle Fucker. And they just use the word fuck as many times as possible as a big middle finger to the studio. So they're in the studio, execs were watching it. They're like, oh, they've done what we asked them to. Oh, shit, no, they haven't.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is when they did the Super Bowl... Paramount decided to go, well, we'll promote it at the Super Bowl. We've made you a trailer. And it was one of those, imagine you're in a mountain town super park. And yet there's things like the the reverse record break and things like that. And they're like, this is garbage. Like, the whole reason South Park's funny, if you're into it, I know you're not particularly, is because it plays stupid subjects more seriously. The characters at least have to take it seriously. This trailer doesn't do that. They made their own trailer where the voice, like the narrative was like, this is a serious movie. And then when you watch, the fact that what's happening on screen is ridiculous is the counterpoint. It's essentially what Airplane does. And Paramount went, yeah, that's great and all, but we're going to go with the original trailer. So Matt Stone went, yeah, that's great. Took the original trailer, the one they were going to play, the shit one, put it in the boot of his car, and drove out to Colorado in some fucking ranch somewhere over the Super Bowl weekend, essentially stole the footage. So they were forced to use the one they'd cut. And then afterwards, the next morning, like, they get a call from, their lawyer calls them and goes, guys, you've got to, even if it didn't get played, you need to return that film reel, because technically what you've done is stolen corporate property. So they had to return it. But the thing is that is a big middle finger to the system. That is rebellious, but it is to positive effect. That is a story I have a lot more respect for than I got wasted and smashed up a hotel room.
I'm just a selfish person. I'm a selfish person. There's a phrase you heard the phrase libertine?
Oh, God. So, the only reason I've heard it is because of that terrible band, the Libertines.
So I never knew what a libertine was until I looked it up today, because
it's an old 1800s word, isn't it, for excessive?
It's someone who is excessive and who actually believe... And I'm not a libertine, to be clear. A libertine is someone, get ready for a paradox, they believe that having a moral code is itself morally wrong. Yeah, which is a paradox. But yeah, I don't know. I've always liked stories like that, and it's weird because I can tell at the same time that it's not nice. Like, if we went to Hollywood, I wouldn't want to see one of my friends do so many drugs that they end up killing themselves. But when you're hearing it about, say, Axl Rose or someone, it's a bit like, yeah, he one time... a cool story is Andre the Giant, on the set of Princess Bride. They went out drinking one time, and he drank, I think it's 40 beers in 1 hour, and wasn't even drunk.
Pissed, yeah.
Like, that's cool as shit. It
that's
shouldn't be.
That's because of the size of him. That's not because he's trying to dick anyone over.
Yeah. But yeah, so just going back to the film, you then get the logical end stage of this excess is shown through Tobey Maguire's character.
Yeah.
We go and meet Tobey Maguire's
I don't like
character.
this scene.
We go and meet Tobey Maguire's character, who's obviously been in Hollywood for a while, is the impression we're given. Yeah. And he is almost a walking corpse. Yeah. He's pallid, his eyes are sunken, his teeth are all yellow. He's definitely as far from Peter Parker mode as he can be.
Yeah, he's not a heartthrob in this film, no. I think it's safe to say.
And that's showing you, I feel, like, oh, if Margot Robbie continues on the path she's on,
she's going to there.
This is where people end up.
Yeah, because he's essentially continued the old Hollywood debauchery, but it's no longer above ground. It's literally underground, in like underground catacombs, and it's even worse somehow. It's more seedy.
Because the problem with excess is, like with drugs, you become inoculized to it.
Yeah.
So you need more. A lot of people don't start with heroin, do they?
No.
They start on something smaller, but eventually the hit just isn't the same.
So they go up to something harder, which gives them that temporarily, and then they have to go up again.
And that's the same with, if you're someone who's inclined towards taboo or fetishistic things, you know...
Yeah, no one starts at Vor, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so anyway.
Not to my knowledge, no.
And that's probably...
They start with Tarantino's feet and go...
Yeah, people start with a little light BDSM and build from there.
Yeah, a little light spanking.
If they overdo it and lose control of themselves.
Yeah, of course.
I'm not by any means saying that people always inevitably do that.
Oh, no.
Plenty of people don't. But if you're in a situation, and it's probably why there's so many you-know-whats in Hollywood, if you're in a situation where day after day you can have whatever the fuck you want at the end of your phone, you literally have a fucking drug dealer on speed dial, as the Nickelback song says, or you can have 50 girls in your hotel room with a click of your fingers, of course you burn out your reaction to that, your dopamine receptors.
You become desensitized.
And you need something more extreme.
Tobey Maguire, and not him himself, but his character in this film, it's like he's so desensitized to everything else. His jollies at the moment are watching a man eat a live rat raw.
Yeah.
And it's like,
a massive,
for everyone else,
guy.
Yeah, and it's like everyone else finds that gross, but he's sitting there like, this is fucking great.
Yeah, he starts throwing money as if it's a strip club, doesn't he?
He's like, do it again.
Yeah. Eat another one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I want to talk then. There's a question I think this film poses.
Okay.
Which is, one of the things that we notice about Brad Pitt's character is he goes through several relationships in the course of this film.
Yes.
And he makes a comment that they always end the same. And I think the first one he marries, the Hungarian, is his fifth wife, I think they say. And he has two more after that in the film.
That's not the first one. He's got the one he pulls up with where he's talking Italian.
Yeah, but he's already married to her. The first one you see him marries the Hungarian girl.
Right, I see,
and I'm sure they say this is his fifth marriage.
Yeah.
So he's on like 7 by the end of the film.
Yeah, we've met number 4. We meet the Hungarian girl.
Then there's Catherine Waterston.
Yeah.
And then there's the girl he's with right at the end when he reconnects with the Chinese lady.
Yes.
And he says to her, yeah, she's a pretty thing. Shame she doesn't know it's going to end the same as it always does.
Right. But it didn't. It did change.
Because he killed himself. I can't help but notice that at least with the Hungarian girl and Catherine Waterston, they are both higher class than he is, in air quotes.
They both seem to be... They're very
theatre actresses, which is a higher art form, in air quotes, which is going to get me to my point.
Sure.
And he himself, we learn, is from a working class background.
Is he working class, or is it more... It's not highborn,
He at least claims he's from a working class, because he says they couldn't afford to go to the theatre.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
No, you are right.
And he has this weird... It is a weird thing. As a working class person, I've felt it myself, and I've seen other people feel it. Working class people tend to get a weird thing with a higher class, where they're fiercely proud of being working class.
Yeah.
But seem to have a need to be accepted by the higher class, which
Yeah.
I think is why so many people in Britain still support the royal family
Yeah.
in 2024.
And why people support people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, Boris Johnson. They're not better people.
Yeah.
You can tell by what they say and what they do. Certainly Boris Johnson is not. He's disgusting as
Yeah.
anybody. But he's higher born.
Yeah. Anyway, there's a bit in the film.
It's very weird. I
Yeah.
just want to say, I have no idea why we're like this shit.
People are complicated. There's a bit in the film where Lucas Haas's character has died, and Brad Pitt gets told, and just before he's told, Catherine Waterston's been directing him. He's
Yeah.
rehearsing, and she's like, no, try and do it slower, try and do this.
Read
And that's pissing him
subtext.
off.
Yeah.
He hangs up the phone, and he snaps at her.
Yeah.
And he has a go at her where he basically makes the argument, I'm not going to quote it word for word, but he basically argues that cinema and film is the working man's art form.
Yeah.
Because working people can't afford to go to the theatre.
Well, to be
I
fair,
know today we can't afford to go to the cinema,
Yeah.
but back then they're the Nickelodeons. They're a nickel to get in.
Yeah. I mean, at one point, someone goes to the cinema, doesn't he, right at the end, and it's 50 cents to enter.
Yeah.
And it's like, nowadays, it's £13 for one fucking ticket. That's insanity at the
Yeah.
Odeon. But it's, the market value has increased. But if you think about going to the theatre, certainly, like, outside of travel costs to get to London or somewhere like that where you get to the big places, you're still looking at least £80 a ticket.
Mate,
40 to £80 a ticket.
Just here in Southend at the Palace Theatre, you're looking at £30 a ticket.
Yeah.
Double what?
That's just for one ticket. That's not for...
And I want to share a story. I'm not going to name and shame because no one would know them anyway. But, because as you know, I like theatre. I prefer film, but I like theatre. There was a news report years ago now. This was around the time I first moved to Southend. And there'd been an article on the news about the fact that theatre is a dying industry. And would it be in the state it's in if they made the tickets cheaper, which would encourage more or free up more people to be able to go? And I was with a group of actors. We were rehearsing for a play. And I said to them, that'd be a great idea. They should totally do that. Theatre needs to be more accessible.
Yeah.
And I'm not joking, and I'm not exaggerating for comedic effect. A girl in the group went, absolutely not. And I went, why? And she went, because it cheapens it. It devalues the theatre-going experience. And I said, what do you mean? And she went, well, you could have all sorts of riffraff sitting in there with you.
That's someone who needs to go in the bin, Jamie.
And I was like, well, I don't talk to this person anymore.
No.
I was a bit like, but first of all, who the fuck do you think you are? You live in Southend-on-Sea. You know what I mean? You're hardly from fucking Cambridge, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Bloody hell. And it did blow my mind. And I do think, to this day, I still feel there is an attitude amongst certain people that cinema is the low-class art form.
Well, I mean,
Because-
it's kind of been replaced over the last sort of 40, 50 years with video games. Cinema is still considered cheaper class than theatre, to be fair, but it's now considered the higher art form compared to video games.
It sort of goes literature, theatre, films, video games.
Because even now, when video games are trying to sell themselves, it's like, oh, it's the most cinematic experience. Like, but it's not cinema. It's not like, why would you want a cinematic video game? But it's because they consider that cinema is a higher class of art. So therefore, it's better because it's cinematic.
But what I was wondering
It's a
is,
buzzword,
do
essentially.
we think, do we think that cinema is inherently a working class art form? And B, do we think that's why you and I, for example, most of the filmmakers I know, with a couple of exceptions, are people who are very much working class, who have those fond memories, like we've sat here and discussed, I watched Nightmare on Elm Street and it changed my life.
Yeah.
When I was sad, I've got a film that I go to that I can take comfort in after I've had a hard day at work or something like that.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. I would say yes and no. There's a mixture. So generally, when people are talking about their favourite movies, they're not the ones that are working class. Things like Terminator 2 or Titanic or, these are not working class productions. These are the most highest budgeted, biggest blockbusters out there. Jurassic Park is another example.
The budgets are high. because this is the paradox that I think exists.
Yeah.
Yes, the budget's high. Titanic, was, as we learn, over $1 million per minute of the film.
Yeah.
But the story definitely is aimed at
Working class.
the working class. It's Romeo and Juliet on a boat.
Yeah, so, I mean, that is another paradigm, I suppose. Yeah, good point. But either way, so the actual entrance into the industry, because you asked me specifically about working class people wanting to get into film. The paradigm is definitely there. Theatre is definitely not something that working class people aspire to. Something that middle class and upper middle class people aspire to. Generally, working class people don't go, oh, one day I'll be in the theatre. Generally. They might say, oh, one day I could be in cinema, or I could be in a film. When it comes to access...
They can't get into it. I'm not saying that.
Well, no. When it comes to access, like, people feel more likely... Because it's not necessarily that working class people can make it easily, but there's the feeling that they've got better of a chance of doing it. Because at the very least... Because certainly nowadays, more so now than then, the access to recording equipment is so much cheaper. So the cost of entry is smaller. So the reason why there's, like, even locally, there's the South End Film Festival, Horror on Sea, things like that. The reason there's so many film festivals is because there's so many people making their own movies. Now, they're not going to be Titanic level at any point. But it's like, there's an innate part to a lot of people where they want to be somewhat timeless. Making a movie gives them some timeless quality. So I think a lot of people find that it's an easy level of entry to immortalise themselves. And in a way, it's something that the working class haven't had a lot of access to prior. Because certainly during, like, Shakespeare's time, you had to be highly educated. To be highly educated, you had to be high-born, generally. Theatre, a working class person cannot get into theatre. Because the cost of getting into theatre... is you need to go to somewhere like RADA.
And the pay's garbage, even once you make it.
Yeah, so you need support from a wealthy family. If you're working class, you don't have that. Number two as well is, like, you need to have access to somewhere like RADA. They don't really do apprenticeships or scholarships, I don't think. So you'd have to pay the entrance fee. Those things, because they get you into to the right people, to speak to the right people, to get into the right places... they cost a lot of money. Working class people can't get there. So it's inherent in the system that we cut out working class people all the way up the chain. Film is one of the few mediums where you can gain access quite cheap. And it's immortalised in a way that theatre performance isn't, because theatre performance is still, you perform it once, and unless it's been filmed, ironically, it's gone forever after that night. Yeah, I think film tends to work towards the working class more. There's a reason why most of the films that are highly regarded, including, like, things like Titanic, that's very much on the side of the working class. The Marx Brothers, during this sort of period that's Babylon's set in, they're always poor immigrant people. Because the Marx Brothers themselves were immigrants to America, or when they were children, they came over. They were German Jews. Who had to acclimatise to America and joined vaudeville as a way to make money. But in their films, they could have easily played the posh upper-class people. They were the money that it was riding on. They never did it. Especially Harpo. Harpo was always a tramp. Yeah. He was like... even when he played the professor, quote-unquote, he was a tramp faking it.
And I don't necessarily mean films about working-class people either.
Right.
I mean... So, for example, the most popular films in the world at the moment are superhero movies. That's not something that traditionally appeals to a highly educated upper-class person.
Right.
It is the sort of narrative... Terminator's the same thing.
You're speaking more to the audience.
Yeah, they are narratives that appeal to an audience, and this is why I get so angry when unnecessary pretension comes into film.
Is it because we like an underdog story? And to be honest, a very quick and easy way to... It's hard to make an underdog story if you're the rich person working against the poor.
Yeah.
Because you've got all the inherent advantages socially and financially. So to make the underdog story be the rich guy is very hard. Yeah. Whereas to make the underdog story the poor guy versus the rich guy, instantly your story has all the narrative advantages. Yeah.
It could be. I think it's just... So, a lot of people who like film would hate something like Iron Man or something like Godzilla or James Bond even. Because, okay, fair enough, there isn't really a deep meaning to Iron Man. Really.
No.
It's just fun.
Yes.
And I think that's what the majority of working class people want. My dad said he hates films where it's all metaphor, and I know we like them, but my dad hates films that are all metaphor and you've got to think about what it really means. He just wants to watch Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt fucking climbing the side of the whatever building it is in Dubai and kicking some bad guy butt, right?
Yeah. There's no deep meaning of what cultural society is all about, yeah.
And it's why I get angry when people look down on films like that, because my argument, I've always said, why can't we have both?
Yeah.
Why can we not watch something like Babylon or something like Mother or Lost in Translation or something, or some world cinema, some foreign film?
Well, we did Nowhere to Hide. That's
Nowhere
quite
to
little
Hide,
known.
Seventh Seal, something that's really open to interpretation and think, why can't we have that and have Godzilla v Kong at the same time? Why do some people feel that both can't exist?
Yeah. I mean, the variety is the spice of life, as they say.
And when people act like that, when people act like films like, say, Godzilla v Kong or Mission Impossible shouldn't exist, it feels to me like they're saying, fuck the working class. If you're not into the same high-taste things I'm into, then you're an idiot and shouldn't have anything.
Would that not also account for people who are pretentious, though? Like, if you went more pretentious movies should also go. Would that not be the same?
I agree. People who say that they shouldn't exist, they're idiots. Why can't people have their pretentious movies?
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. It can both exist. To make it about video games for a minute, just because it's a recent example, as you know, we've discussed,
it's the new media.
Yeah. As we've discussed many times on our sister show VGMP, I bought myself Alan Wake 2 for my birthday last year. It's the best goddamn game I've played in years. I fucking love it. It's brilliant. It's intelligent. I played it through 3 or 4 times in a row. I adore that game. It will forever hold a special place in my heart. Alan Wake 2 will. I literally think it's that good. There are people online calling it a walking simulator, calling it boring, and saying it shouldn't exist. And this is the thing. You can call it a walking simulator. You can say you found it boring. That's fine. You don't have the right to say it shouldn't exist. I've literally read people sitting there arguing that Spider-Man 2 should have had the nominations that Alan Wake 2 got.
Right.
And arguing that
but it's nowhere near the same sort of game.
It's a completely different game. It's an action game. Yeah. I'm sure it's a fun game because the last Spider-Man game was fun. But it is a mash X to win game. Fine, you can have those. I'm not saying get rid of them. I hate Fortnite, but I'm not saying you have to get rid of it.
Yeah.
You can have it, it's just not for me.
Yeah.
But there is this thing where people are sat there going, they shouldn't be wasting money making games like Alan Wake 2 and things like that. Single-player, thought-provoking games. They should just be... I've even heard it with Baldur's Gate 3, which was Game of the Year last year.
Yeah.
And I haven't played it, but by all accounts, is an absolute masterpiece of a game. And very rare for games these days, because they're all full of fucking DLC, fully works on release and is full of content, like packed to the brim with content. No DLC. The studio that made it have confirmed there is no DLC coming. That is the complete game there. There's people saying it shouldn't exist because they don't like that style of game.
Well, then don't play it.
It's D&D in video game form. It's for nerds.
It's always been that, though.
Video games have always been for nerds. Fuck off, you who's come in via FIFA.
Yeah. Yeah, well, to bring it back to film, we, in a similar vein, you were talking about whether or not they should have the awards, quote-unquote. Over the last year, we've had that with the Barbie and Oppenheimer shit. Because Barbie is... I think the film that has made the most money with a female director or something like that.
Yes.
So because it attained such a high amount of money, and good on it, where it didn't win certain awards like Best Director
or Best Picture.
People kicked off and gone, oh, that's disgusting. Because it made the most money, it should actually win Best Picture.
Yeah,
And it's
but
like,
Avengers Endgame should have won it then.
Yeah, the thing that in the Oscars, it's never been the metric that the most successful financially movie is the one that wins the award.
No,
because let's be honest, Oscars has always been pretentious, and if you're gonna go,
and it's the one where the studio bribes the Academy with the most amount of money. Let's be honest.
But also, honestly, did you honestly think a Barbie movie, no matter how good you think it is, would ever win a pretentious Oscar? It's not that type of movie.
No, let's talk about Barbie for a minute, because this is the eternal fair play. I haven't seen it. Fair play to Margot Robbie as the producer and to Greta Gerwig, the director. Good on them. They made a shitload of money, and by all accounts, it's a very good film. I haven't seen it. But they were always going to have a problem with Barbie that was an unwinnable problem. Greta Gerwig makes feminist movies, right?
Yeah.
Cool, great, fine. You were never going to get a high budget for a feminist movie that was an original IP.
No.
So you have to make it under the name of something else. Barbie in this case. The problem is, the minute you put the name Barbie on it, you limit how seriously it's going to be taken.
Yeah.
Case in point, my dad, when I went back to Mansfield, my dad hasn't seen Barbie. He has no intention of watching it. He also doesn't know it's a feminist film, because my dad, being an older man who doesn't give a shit, literally saw the word Barbie and people going, oh, it's going to win an Oscar, and went, has the world gone fucking mad? A film about a plastic doll?
Yeah.
Has been... To be fair, he did the same thing when Heath Ledger won the Oscar for The Dark Knight.
Right.
My dad turned round, he hadn't seen it at the time, and he turned round to me and went, it's a Batman movie. It's a movie about a man dressed as a bat who punches a clown in the face.
Yeah, essentially it's another toy.
As Bruce Campbell said, and I've always loved this interview, people look down on B movies, but the most popular movies in the world are now B movies with a high budget.
Yeah.
As he said, anytime your film's plot is man dresses as bat and punches clown in the face, that's a B movie.
Yeah.
Anytime your film's plot is man gets bitten by radioactive spider and becomes Spider-Man, that's a B movie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you're 100% right.
So my point is, though, Barbie was never a fair play, because it was an unwinnable situation for Greta Gerwig. Barbie was never going to be an award-winning film, because purely on the all of the associations that come with it being a Barbie movie.
Well, let's put it in another context. We've been talking about video games. A video game movie comes out. Let's say they do, I don't know, Call of Duty the movie, or what's coming out, Knuckles, the Knuckles series. Sonic the Hedgehog 3, that's coming out this year. They put Sonic the Hedgehog 3 out. Should that win Best Picture Oscar, even if it's a brilliant movie? Of course it's not. If you suggested that, I think Sonic the Hedgehog 3 should be the best Oscar winner of best movie ever.
Sorry.
People would be like, sorry, it's a kids thing.
Yeah,
right?
move over Tarantino, who by then will have released his last ever film. Move over Christopher Nolan and whatever you've done next, and move over whoever, whatever, or maybe Darren Aronofsky does something. I don't know. We want to give this year's Best Picture Award to Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
And let's be honest.
3 as well, not even Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, and let's be honest, the one that's probably got the best chance at it this year of being Oscar-worthy would be, at least as far as we're concerned, but let's be honest, we know it would never happen, would be something like Return to Silent Hill, because it's based on a video game that is deep, that has more to say, that's layered, but
Horror films don't win Oscars.
Yeah. So, but it's not only if it's just that it's a horror film, but despite that, it's a video game movie. So it can be the deepest, most intellectual video game movie ever made. It's not getting an Oscar.
Yeah. Expecting Barbie to win Oscars was foolish.
And the fact that people know this, because when certain actors do certain roles, they go, oh, that's just Oscar bait.
Yeah.
Well, it can't be Oscar bait unless you know that there's a type of film that gets Oscars. And if you know there's a type of film, you know Barbie ain't it.
Anyway, do we have anything else to say about Babylon, or do you think we've discussed it quite thoroughly?
I think the only other thing we might need to say, because this has been a really interesting but big and winding conversation, I think we should just nip it in the bud and just state whether or not we would recommend the film and whether or not we found it enjoyable.
Okay. That's actually really tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough. I did like the film. That's my second time seeing it, and I still liked it. It's long, and you feel the length.
Yeah.
And for that reason, it's really hard for me to recommend it to an average person. It's long. It's about a subject matter that not necessarily everyone's going to be interested in. I think if you've liked and appreciated Damien Chazelle's other work, you should probably watch it. And I think if you're a filmmaker or someone who is just a very big film fan who's interested specifically in the history of film,
Yeah, big cinephile.
I think then you probably should check it out.
Yeah.
If you're the sort of person who just goes to the cinema occasionally to watch the latest Marvel movie, you can probably skip this. You're not going to get any enjoyment out of it.
I think I'm in full agreement with you. It is an enjoyable film. It's not a bad film. It is way too long. There's a lot that should have been trimmed. This very much is the director basically wanking on screen and going, look what I can do. Which is a shame because there are some real strong scenes in this. But yeah, if you're an actor, if you're into cinema as a fan or in terms of wanting to work there or working there, then give it a watch. Otherwise, it's probably a miss for a lot of the general public don't need to see it. Which is a shame because if it had been shorter, I think I would have said yes to that as well.
Yes, I would, yeah. If this was more palatable, I would have done, but it's not. Okay, well, I think that's enough talk for today. We've been going for quite a while. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Second Take Cinema. We really appreciate it. Please do like, share, subscribe, etc. Leave us a review if you could. That would be wonderful. And feel free to email us at info.impalafilms@gmail.com to let us know if there's a particular film you'd like us to check out. You can also check out our sister show, VGMP, the Video Game Movie Podcast, where we talk about films based on video games. And that show kind of has a bit more of a comedic bent to it. You can also check out our audio drama franchise, Haunted the Audio Drama, which is a sort of horror mystery with a dash of comedy thrown in, which has done 2 full seasons at this point. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.